Brace yourselves. I'm buying the hype.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this one. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. LSU, I've got them going to the playoff this year. I'll explain their record prediction, why Penn State is the best in the Big Ten, all on today's show, which starts with, should I call them my Texas Tech Red Raiders at this point? Maybe I'm just a sucker. I'm all in and talking about these two teams today on programs that have been perennially almost great and haven't been able to get over the hump and have the potential. And this year, I'm buying. And maybe part of the reason I'm buying Texas Tech to go to the Big 12 championship game against Kansas State is that there's this sense I have with both them and Penn State, with their returning roster, veteran quarterbacks, experienced head coaches who I like, that haven't always shown up in the biggest spots in the way that we'd perhaps like them to. Maybe I'm picking them just because I say to myself, if not now, when? I don't think this is the last time Texas Tech can go legitimately push for a Big 12 championship. I do think it's a great opportunity. I think Penn State, if they don't make the conference championship game this year, and let's not forget they were one possession away from winning it a year ago against Oregon. They lost that game 45-37, and they were driving for the tie late in the fourth quarter. If Penn State doesn't get there this year, I think it'll be a couple of years before they get back, because Michigan's going to ascend, Ohio State and Oregon will stabilize their young rosters next year and be more experienced. It'll take a while. Texas Tech could fail to make the Big 12 championship game this year and get back next season, or not get back, but get there. And so the parity in the Big 12 is going to be great again, and I think Texas Tech winds up at 10-2. And guess what? A bunch of you are going to eviscerate me. I'm okay with that. I've come to terms with it. As you're listening to or watching this show, I might be asleep. I'm sleeping just fine. I guarantee it. Unless, for some reason, the bed I'm sleeping on stops being comfortable. And, well, I don't know why that would change from last night. So let's do it right here. I'm going on the record picking Texas Tech to make the Big 12 championship game. I'll make my championship game picks perhaps at a later time. I think it's more interesting to pick who will make the game rather than who will win it, because a lot changes between now and then. But on paper, this Red Raiders team should get to the Big 12 championship game. You're coming off a season in which you won more games than a lot of programs in college football, 8 in the regular season, and you return your quarterback, and you return a lot of your roster, and you should have good weapons. And I don't know what's going to happen with Micah Hudson and whatnot, but you've got a couple of defensive line transfers that were at Power 4 programs last year in the ACC and are game changers in Romello Height and David Bailey. Bailey was one of the top players to move in the spring transfer portal window. Massive pickup for Texas Tech. So I applaud the Red Raiders for maximizing their investment in their football program, and that's why I'm giving them my faith and respect here on the show today. So they start with Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State at home. That will be a 3-0 beginning. And then it starts to get a little bit choppy. 2 road games to begin Big 12 play for my Red Raiders. I don't love that at all. I don't know what Brett Yormark has against those in Lubbock. I have absolutely positively nothing against the Red Raiders. I would never schedule them to go on the road to Utah and Houston. I think they split with that loss coming to Utah, because I see Utah as someone that can also get to the Big 12 championship game this year with Devin Dampier at quarterback. Rice Eccles, even in a down year. BYU was a conference title contender last year. They won 11 football games. That's pretty good. They still struggled at Rice Eccles. It's a big rivalry game, tough place to play. You have to show me, even as much as Texas Tech has shown me, You've got to show me something serious. You've got to show me on the field before I'm going to pick you to go win at Rice-Eccles, because I respect that stadium so much. I have called multiple games there myself in what you might call a lower stakes setting. That crowd is not to be underestimated. I'm not going to do that. So at Utah, loss. At Houston, win. Kansas, win. Then Texas Tech will have to be road warriors this year. I think if they had a more favorable schedule in the Big 12, their win total might be 10.5 in the eyes of odds makers. It sits at 8.5. I like the over, provided by our friends at FanDuel. At Arizona State, Oklahoma State, at Kansas State. You might say I'm too bold for saying they're going to win those three games, or two of those three road games against Utah, Arizona State, and Kansas State. I think Oklahoma State should be improved from last year, but the bar is basically the floor. So do I think they go into Lubbock and win? No, I certainly do not. Though there will be a shocker on this schedule. Just you wait. But those three road games that I have discussed are going to be the key. Not just because they are difficult conference road games, because they're against programs I expect to be in the Big 12 championship race. Kansas State, yeah, they're towards the top of my preseason Big 12 power rankings. Arizona State, yeah, they're number 2, only to Texas Tech, who I have at number 1. Oklahoma State, yeah, that's not a team that scares me a whole heck of a lot. You better avoid the look-ahead factor, though. You better not start looking ahead to Kansas State in Manhattan the following week. I think then the Red Raiders come back home after 2 of 3 on the road. They play BYU, who without Jake Retzloff, I'm just not going to have a ton of faith in until I see what they actually have at quarterback. I think they're a pullback team. I think that's a win. I think UCF is a win. Wait for it. This is the Big 12, right? This is Heath Ledger's Joker. This is his perfect conference. Why? He is an agent of chaos. This is a conference of chaos. So of course, I am going to throw in Texas Tech losing at West Virginia the last week of the regular season. Why wouldn't I? Bring on the tiebreakers. Bring on the playoff doubt and uncertainty. Try to put your 10-win schedule up against a 9-win from the SEC or the Big Ten in a 12-team playoff format with straight seeding, thank goodness, because they pulled their heads out of their rear ends in the college football deciding area of the world and realized, yeah, what we did last year was not a good idea. So you think I'm crazy to say they could go at Kansas State and at Arizona State and win, but lose at West Virginia? Maybe I am. Maybe this 10-2 works out differently. But let me ask you, does anything in this conference from the last couple of years surprise you? There is no other league, according to odds makers, with a smaller gap between kind of the second-tier teams and the top-tier teams. You have legitimately, for those watching on YouTube, my Big 12 preseason power rankings look like this. My top 7, I think, are all capable of winning the conference. Texas Tech, Arizona State, Kansas State, Iowa State, Baylor, Utah, TCU. Unfortunately for Texas Tech, they play 3 of my top 6 power-rated teams, and they play them all on the road. That's not great. They're going to have to be road warriors this year. That's tough. You find a way to go 2-1 in those games, you're in a good spot. You go 1-2, just go win in Morgantown, which they should be able to do. But I'm throwing craziness in there because this is the Big 12. This isn't logical. This doesn't make sense. There's no rhyme or reason to anything that happens here. On the record, officially, Texas Tech 10-2 should be, tiebreakers notwithstanding, enough to get to the Big 12 championship game, where I think they play Kansas State. Yeah, that's what I'm going with. And last year, my Big 12 championship game was flawless, so this one should be just as good. Thoughts in the comments, you drop them there. Hit me up on Twitter at @SMcLaughlinCFB, all that good stuff. What about the SEC title game? Will it feature the LSU Tigers? First, this episode brought to you by Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, and I'm a big routine guy, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration's where it all starts, and that is where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar, of a leading sports drink. I'm a big golfer. I play a lot. My brother's coming to visit this weekend. We're going to play golf 4 days in a row. You know what's really important? Staying hydrated out there. It's summertime. It's warm. If you get dehydrated, your golf game will become a lot more difficult to succeed at, and then it's not as much fun. So Drip Drop is the perfect solution for fast hydration, and that is why you need to check them out. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. If you pay really close attention or just listen to the segment, because I'm going to point it out, you could argue that I have a hypocritical component to my thinking in a couple of different areas here. Just the one area, actually, but a couple different situations is what I was trying to get at there. So Texas Tech and Penn State are teams that I'm buying this year wholeheartedly. As much as anyone realistically can, I'm buying Texas Tech and Penn State. They haven't proven it on the field, but is the potential there? Yes, absolutely. The ingredients are there. They just need to be properly mixed to get the recipe we're looking for. They've been a little off, a little undercooked, a little overcooked. The pan wasn't greased properly. You overcooked the meat before putting it into whatever you made that went into the oven, so it got a little overdone. It was a little dry. I could say the same thing about Brian Kelly and big week 1 games. First of all, let me applaud LSU, as I have before and will continue to do, because LSU is not someone that lacks quality non-conference opponents. Do I wish they had 10 Power 4 opponents? I do. Do they make about as difficult of a 9 Power 4 game conference schedule with a quality non-conference game as you can? Yeah, they're trying their best out there, because LSU starts the season at Clemson, who, as every day passes, I get closer and closer to making my preseason national championship pick. I really do. Brian Kelly has not proven to me, and this could be the year, top-ranked transfer portal class, veteran quarterback who I love, by the way. The two guys that I love as much as anyone, not that no one else likes them, but I love them at quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier, Josh Hoover. LSU and TCU, respectively. It has nothing to do with the fact that they are both 3-letter acronym schools that end with U. So Clemson is a game that really is reminiscent for Brian Kelly's LSU teams. They kept playing Florida State, lost. They played USC week 1 last year, lost. And I could make the same case about LSU, but I don't call it a gut instinct. I'm not going to trust Brian Kelly in that spot, not in a true road game environment against Dabo Swinney, the way that I'm trusting Texas Tech and Penn State. And heck, Brian Kelly only has to do it for 1 game. But that's how little confidence I have in Brian Kelly to win that game. Fear not, LSU fans. This is not a dunk on the Tigers sort of segment. Clemson could make a run to the national championship game. I've compared them to Ohio State from a year ago. High level of returning production, a good team from the year before, experienced coach who's proven he can win in big spots, but is still trying to prove one more thing. For Ryan Day, that was win a national championship at all. For Dabo, it's win a national championship in the modern era. I think Clemson could go 10-2 and win the national championship. I think they're going to beat LSU at home week 1. Phenomenal game. The week 1 slate of college football is so good. Kansas State, Iowa State will be really fun in week 0. Week 1 rocks. Georgia Tech at Colorado, LSU at Clemson, Miami at Notre Dame, just to name a few. Oh, Ohio State hosting Texas. Pretty good. Week 1 is going to slap. At Clemson, I'm taking LSU to lose. They're only going to lose 1 time the rest of the season, though. Louisiana Tech, win. Florida at home, win. I don't trust Billy Napier. I don't know what's going on with DJ Lagway and the injury situation there. Let's monitor that closely because That could have some serious ramifications in the SEC. Southeast Louisiana, of course, that's a win. At Ole Miss, I think LSU is a step forward team. I think Ole Miss is a step back team this year. South Carolina, that was quite the game a year ago, but that was at South Carolina. Gamecocks going to Death Valley, they might have to endure some chants that I will not repeat on this particular show. But Pat McAfee might get a crowd to repeat on game day if it wound up being that sort of matchup, as we've seen before. I think they beat South Carolina. I love Lenora Sellers. Who doesn't? He's exciting to watch. Going on the road, yeah, you gotta give me more than being my preseason number 5 team in the SEC. LSU is my preseason number 4. So if you give me the 4 team over the 5 team at home, yeah, I'm going to go with my own rankings there. At Vanderbilt the next week, win. Texas A&M at home, win. Here comes loss number 2 at Alabama, who I really like. I think Bama goes 11-1, gets to the SEC championship game. And again, tiebreakers can get all crazy and whatnot. Let's just focus on what the records are going to be and where that puts you. Because, by the way, 10-2 in the Big Ten or SEC, we've seen that's getting you in the playoff. I think LSU's a playoff team this year. At Alabama's a loss, and then let's close with 3 straight wins. Arkansas, that late season SEC cupcake is right there. Western Kentucky, it's not an FCS opponent, it's a Conference USA. That's not going to matter one bit. At Oklahoma, I like what the Sooners have done this offseason. I think they're a solidly respectable team. I like LSU more. I've seen more Garrett Nussmeier in the SEC. I have seen a roster that was better than Oklahoma's last year get even better. I think Oklahoma will be an improved team. So too will LSU. And I'm not in the camp that thinks that Oklahoma is ready to make the jump and be a playoff team. I think they can win enough. I haven't done their record yet on the show. I think Oklahoma can win enough to keep Brent Venables' job. That better be, even with that schedule, at least 7, if not 8 wins, or Brent Venables might be shown the door and we'll have an SEC coaching vacancy, which we didn't have last offseason. So that'd be exciting to cover and whatnot. But you can book it down. LSU, 10-2, gets to the playoff, SEC title. That's okay. Whether they get there, whether they don't, might depend on the tiebreakers and who they beat and who's there and all that sort of stuff. I like LSU. I'm a Garrett Nussmeier fan. Not everybody is. I'm one of those guys. I'm also one of those guys that loves Penn State. And you know what? Hear me out. Recently, I joined Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions to talk about Penn State and where they fit into the Big Ten landscape. Here's what that conversation sounded like.
So the Big Ten is really top-heavy. Penn State, Ohio State, and I think if Oregon figures out that 5th, 6th gear, they're a second-half team. They might peak at the right time going into the postseason because we want to talk about consistency and continuity with Penn State. You have Will Steinbach because, you're not breaking in a new offense. You're just breaking in a new quarterback, running back, majority of the offensive line. Wide receivers, Evan Stewart, unfortunately, out for the season.
Yeah,
it's
just that.
But that's still offensively a gifted team. They just need to gel at some point. The same thing with Ohio State. New quarterback, new offensive coordinator, right? Brian Hartline, first-time OC. I know he's been there for a long time, but they held off on him for a while.
He's never been a play caller before, Zach.
Yeah,
has not done it. It's one of the reasons I think they lose to Texas in week 1.
Yes.
Am I supposed to pretend like Brian Hartline? I mean, maybe he is going to be that good. You tell me he's going to be at his peak as an OC, which he can totally be good at, of course. He's going to be at his peak just firing on all cylinders right away, immediately. There's going to be no growth, no development, no progression.
Quarterback?
With a brand new quarterback, yeah, who's never played college football before. Like I'm supposed to believe that? I don't believe that.
So there's going to be growing pains with Oregon, with Ohio State, but these teams are still really good. It's their ceiling. They're not going to reach their ceiling, I don't think, until towards the end of the season. And then can you withstand how tough a Big Ten conference is now to a point where, okay, you can go 10-2 and not miss the playoff, because that's the thing. Those teams that don't withstand those 12-game schedules. But, I mean, that's besides the point. I'm not trying to imply that Ohio State and Oregon don't make the college football playoff, but we've seen some of the better teams never live up to their potential because they don't make it through a long season, whether that's college football or the NFL. So Penn State has all of that consistency, that continuity. There's the only chemistry that Penn State would need to build is through the passing game. Go figure, once again, because you do lose Tyler Warren and you bring in Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson. You're just going to need to get acclimated, but it's a lot easier to do when it's a third-year starting quarterback, same OC, entire offensive line is back for the most part, 2 superstar running backs. That's why Penn State should be favored to win the Big Ten in the regular season and the Big Ten title. And that's a synopsis of why they'd be better than Ohio State and Oregon. I imagine you agree with me that the Ohio State game is still going to be tougher than the Oregon one, especially where Penn State plays the Ducks. Earlier in the season, like I said, I do not want to play Oregon later on in the season. I'm glad that's game 4 for Penn State and not game 10, for example.
Yeah, game 4 at home off a bye, cross-country trip. That's a lot of advantages in a whiteout game. Although Penn State fans might not like me for this one, I actually, as an Oregon guy, would rather play that game in the whiteout than a big noon kickoff.
Oh, yeah.
I want no part of Oregon's football team kicking off at 9 a.m. Do you know, even if you go a couple days before, your body clock is not all the way adjusted. You're waking up you probably wake up a solid 3 to 4 hours before kickoff because you have to go have your team meal and then you have to bus to the stadium and then you go through warm-up. You're probably looking at about 4 hours, roughly. So, every team does their logistics differently at Southern Utah. I think we're usually awake around 4 hours prior to kickoff, if it's an earlier kick. So I want no part for Oregon to play at 9 a.m. West Coast time. That hasn't gone well for West Coast teams. At least it didn't last year, and I don't. Yeah, so. And it's not going to suddenly just, get really easy. But your point on Oregon is a really good one because their talent on their roster is really good. The experience just isn't there. But by the end of the season, when they, go through their tough stretch of November, I think it can be there and they can be a much better team. I mean, you look at, what they did last year. They went from struggling with Idaho and Boise State to in the middle of the year beating the future national champs, and Washington comes into town who it was not as good as Boise State last year but was certainly much better than Idaho, and Oregon beats the crap out of them. So I think that progression is there. I think the coaching staff has taken steps forward with how they approach game planning and game day execution and adjustments and whatnot over the last few years. And it's an interesting contrast with Oregon and Ohio State because they are different, and I think you could make this case readily about Ohio State that, hey, by the time they play Penn State at home, they're going to be a lot better than when they play Texas. I agree.
And they will.
Yeah, I fully agree. I just still think the advantage for Penn State with the coaching staff, with the roster all being there, I think they're going to find a way to get that game done. And I would feel even more confident if it was Penn State, Ohio State in week 2 or something of that nature. But Ohio State doesn't have a ton of player continuity from last year. They're turning over a lot. They recruited at a high level. This is why. They are turning over both their coordinators. Oregon's returning both of their coordinators. Oregon's going into their 3rd straight season with the same trio: head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator.
Talk about continuity.
That is a rarity. It is a huge rarity, and I would be pretty surprised if it goes to a 4th. I think Will Stein will end up being a head coach in 2026 somewhere. I hope not, because I like him a lot as Oregon's OC. He's really good. But I wonder, the Ducks do at least get 4 games under their belt that they shouldn't have major problems winning to begin the season before they go and play Penn State. How prepared can the staff, that veteran, experienced staff, get this young, talented Oregon team ready, especially Dante Moore, to go to Penn State for their 5th straight game to start the year? We're going to find out. But I think that contrast between the two is fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up. And then you mentioned earlier, other teams that can kind of sneak up on everybody in the Big Ten. Do you remember who my preseason number 4 team is in the Big Ten Conference? My power rankings?
I didn't know there'd be a pop quiz. Was it, well, because they don't. So Penn State doesn't play Illinois, but was it Illinois? Or was
it is indeed the Illinois Fighting Illini.
Fortunately, they don't play them. Maybe
Yeah.
in the Big Ten championship. Maybe. I doubt it.
Yeah, and Illinois is my dark horse to make the Big Ten championship game.
Their schedule's just tough.
Dark horse. Their schedule does not work out as favorably as I would like. They do miss Penn State, but they've got Ohio State at home. They've got USC at home. If they can just beat Indiana on the road, and I think they will, you could look up and see Illinois at 10-2, and maybe that's enough to get your way to Indianapolis again this year. But I think the easy one to look at Penn State's schedule and say, boy, that might trip them up, Iowa.
Iowa at Kinnick, yeah.
Yeah, Iowa at Kinnick is upset special.
Especially right before Ohio State.
Yeah, you got to avoid the look-ahead factor. You've got to go on the road, and you're going to have a hostile environment against a program that has a very high floor, not the ceiling that a Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State have, or some other programs in the Big Ten like USC, Washington, and keep going down the list. But I think that game has always got upset potential. I feel that way for Oregon too. I think it's one of Oregon's.
That's anybody. That's not.
Yeah. I sent out a poll to my Locked On Ducks insiders the other day. If I pick Oregon to go 10-2 with a loss at Penn State, who do you think the other loss is going to be? Over 80% of those that responded said Iowa, and the second one was Washington because it's on the road. It's a rivalry game, but Iowa is the one that has people's attention. So. That's one of those games that from a narrative standpoint, Penn State always wins, right? They win the games they should. They lose the games they should. Yeah, exactly. They'll be favored in that game. So I do think they're going to find a way to win, and they just have more overall talent. I'm going to wait and see on Mark Gronowski. FCS to FBS jumps can go really well. They can go really poorly. And I don't quite know. I haven't checked out enough Gronowski film to feel strongly one way or the other. But frankly, with FCS game tape, it's really tough. It's
so top heavy. You can't get a good margin of how good is this guy in comparison to the competition.
Yeah, I call a lot of FCS football games every year for Southern Utah, and it's not that it isn't good, exciting, fun football that fans enjoy. It absolutely is. To say that walking by an FCS team as someone who's a 5'8.5" play-by-play announcer and podcaster feels the same as walking by a Big Ten team, nope. Those two things are not the same. This is just a majorly different caliber of athlete that you're dealing with. So I think the Iowa game is the one that stands out as like, if Penn State were to get tripped up where they shouldn't, that would be the one. But I'm sticking to my guns here, Seyko. I'm 12-0.
They're favored against everybody except Ohio State. So if you're going off of that measure, then Penn State's going to go at least 11.
Do we have an Ohio State line?
Thought it was 3.5, 4.5, depending on where you look. So it's in that ballpark. Hey, that's within a
free
touchdown.
Money. Free money. That's what I call it. That's what I call that right there. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.